Hey, John, thanks so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Let's get right into it. What is the best advice you've ever gotten?
Boy, the best advice I've ever gotten. Uh, Something that sticks with me. I had a little league baseball coach that always told me or told us that proper preparation prevents poor performance. And I've taken that into my professional world to always do as much due diligence and research before I do anything and to make sure I have all the information that I need to successfully communicate things. And I think that's really stuck with me throughout college and as I've gotten into my professional life and especially in government affairs.
Nice. What is the best compliment you have ever received?
Um, Well, it's probably a little bit of recency bias, but as we'll get into a little bit more, I I recently took over the director of government affairs job, and recently a senator just told me he thought I was doing a really good job, and I think that's one of the best compliments I got because I'm just getting into this new role, and to hear an elected official tell me he thinks I'm doing good was a good compliment that'll probably stick with me for a while.
That's nice. What is the one myth or misconception about lobbying?
That's a good question. I think I'll remember. I remember back at the beginning of last year when I started into this world. There's a lot of people down at the General Assembly one day, and one of the members of the public said, "I can't believe they let lobbyists in here. These are the bad guys." And there is that misconception, but I think the misconception is that there's just a bunch of backroom deals and money being exchanged, and that there's just a lot of shadiness, I guess is the word, and very transactional and bad actors in it. But in reality, it's a lot. It sometimes can be a lot more boring than that, and you're dealing with statutory language, different bill language, and you're reading pages and pages of very dry language like that. But yeah, it's not as flashy, not as much money, and things like that.
What do you think is the role of a lobbyist?
I think the role of a lobbyist is, a communicator. I think their job is to take a lot of information, whether they're representing, a trade association, an ideology, a specific industry, something like that. Take all the information that entity has, boiling it down and being able to communicate that quickly and effectively to lawmakers so that the lawmakers have all the information they need, because there's so many issues, especially in state government, that a lawmaker can't know everything. And so an effective lobbyist is able to communicate that information succinctly so a lawmaker can have the relevant information that they need to work on a bill, take a vote on a bill, things like that. So I think it's really a synthesizer of information is what lobbyists do a lot. And really a salesman. I mean, they have to sell this information, and there's a lot that goes into that.
And what inspires or motivates you?
Um, well, I think the biggest inspiration for me, I think, is just the love of our system of government, of self-government. I hold that in very, very high regard, and I think that an informed citizenry and effective government, people understanding what their government's doing, why they're doing it, and making sure that they have a seat at the table. I mean, I think that's all extremely important. And so that's what inspires me to work in this system and make sure it works as best as possible, and that the people that I represent through my organization get their voices heard at the legislature, because that's how the system works. And so, yeah, I think the love of self-government is a lot of what inspires me.
That's cool. And I'm going to be a bit selfish here. I love to travel. So I would love to know, what is your favorite destination spot and why?
Um, Again, probably a little bit biased, but I would have to say Boone, North Carolina. That's where I went to school, up in the mountains there, and it's just a beautiful place. Mountains, lakes, rivers, valleys. It's a pretty amazing place. So I'd say Boone, North Carolina.
Oh, I love that answer. So, what is the one thing you would like to share, which very few people know about you?
Boy, something about me. Um, that's a good question. I Maybe we come back to that one.
Sure.
I don't know. Nothing comes to mind right now. That one
No,
kind of caught me off guard.
no, no worries,
Yeah,
no worries at all.
yeah.
So it probably means that you're an open book, so which is a good sign too. So
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think I'm pretty open about everything. So yeah, I don't know. Nothing comes to mind right now. I'm
no,
sorry.
no problem at all.
Yeah.
And the last question I had for the rapid fire is, what are you really thankful for?
Um, really thankful for my family. I mean, I wouldn't be here without them. I'm extremely thankful for my fiance, my partner that's going to be my wife soon. Those two are probably the most important to me, and everything is family and my future wife.
Nice. With that, let's jump into your past. Can you tell us a little bit about where did you grow up and how was your childhood like?
Yeah. So I was born in Savannah, Georgia. Only stayed there for about a year. Moved up to South Carolina, stayed there for about a year or two as well, and then settled in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that's sort of where I call home. That's where I grew up and where I spent the most time at. And we grew up north of Charlotte in the Lake Norman area. Had a brother and sister, younger brother and sister, so a decently big family. And Cornelius, North Carolina, where I grew up, was a wonderful place. We were on the lake there, so I was very fortunate that I got to spend a lot of time on the lake as a child. And then a lot of most of the people that I graduated high school with, I'd been going to school with since elementary school, so I knew most of these people for a long time. So I was really thankful to grow up in an environment like that, and love to go back and visit Cornelius, even though it's changed a lot since I grew up there, booming Charlotte suburb.
Nice. And what were you interested in as a child? Was it sports or politics or anything like that?
Not politics, I can tell you that much. Definitely sports. I played baseball, basketball, and then eventually lacrosse in high school. But yeah, I mean, sports was a big part of my life, and yeah, I mean that's what I was really into. Actually, I kind of was just thinking, my parents always thought I was going to be like an engineer or something like that, because I always like to build Legos and build things out of blocks, Lincoln Logs, things like that. So that was a big interest of mine when I was a lot younger. I'd always like to build things out of Legos.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
And so what happened after high school? So I'm guessing you were good at math and science, and were you inclined to get into that, or what happened after that?
Yeah, I mean, so my interest in politics sort of came out at the end of high school. As I got older, started to kind of understand the world a little bit more. My grandpa was actually involved in politics in DC. So I grew up with a lot of stories. That's where my dad grew up, outside of DC. So I grew up with a lot of stories of Washington, DC, and how that place was. And then I took a AP government class in high school and had a great teacher there that really kind of inspired me to learn more about history and government and how that interacts with our world today. And so that was a lot of my interest in politics. And then I went to school, I went to Appalachian State, not really knowing what I wanted to do, and wasn't really interested in figuring that out probably the first 2 years. But I had always kind of thought about kind of taking the route that my grandpa did of getting into politics, and he's did some lobbying work, so I knew about lobbying, and I thought that you had to go to law school to be a lobbyist. So I did the pre-law track at Appalachian State. for a couple of years, but then I realized probably around my junior year that I didn't want to go to any more school. I thought 4 years would be enough. So I switched just to the American government track of political science. And so studied that for a while. And then once I got to the end of undergrad, I realized I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work in politics, but I didn't know where that would take me. So kind of at the suggestion of one of my professors, I stayed at Appalachian State, got my master's degree in American politics. And that really set me up for, entering into the public policy world. So it was an interesting path. I changed my mind a lot, even though I kind of knew that the political world was where I wanted to end up. It was more a matter of me trying to figure out how to get there.
Okay. And did you ever go to DC?
Yeah. I went to DC on a school field trip in 5th grade, and I remember that very vividly. I remember going to see all the monuments and going Washington Mall, things like that. And then I also went at the end of undergraduate school. Actually, for my last couple credits, there was what's called a Washington at Work trip, and so we went up there, did a lot of meetings with a lot of different places up there. And I'm a history nerd. I'm a political nerd. So to go up there with a much bigger understanding of the system and, have these meetings with people, go see these institutions up there. I mean, I was just kind of in awe at all of it. And so, and then I did an internship in DC for Senator Thom Tillis in the summer of 2016. And so that was a great experience to actually be on the Hill, learn about how the Capitol works, and really just get to know DC better. And again, just to soak in all the history that's in that town. And, it was just a wonderful experience. So yeah, I love Washington, DC. And yeah, I love to visit it up there.
Okay, pretty cool. And how did you get that internship?
I just applied for it. They kind of had a rolling summer internship program, found out about it and applied and got lucky enough to be chosen, because I know there's a big pool of people, and I had about 5 or 6 co-interns at the time. So it was just dumb luck to get selected there. And
And was that your first job, or like was there anything before that?
So actually, I mean, that was my first political job, or not really my first political job. Actually, just before that, my junior year of college, I worked as a campaign intern for North Carolina State Representative Jonathan Jordan. He represented Watauga and Ashe County. And so I worked with his field director, and I handled a lot of the on-campus outreach for Representative Jordan. So that's kind of how I got my start. I really enjoyed the campaign work, but I knew that wasn't a long-term thing for me. So I got to know a little bit more about elected officials and everything. And so that's why I wanted to try my hand at Washington, D.C. and working on the Hill there.
Ah, okay. And what was your experience like in DC? And did you see any notices? I mean, like, did you notice any differences between working there and then working in North Carolina?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of difference. But yeah, while I was up there, I mean, the main things were it's an expensive place to live. It's tough for young people to get in. There's so many people that want to go to DC. I mean, you think about young, aspiring political folks from across the country. They all see DC as sort of this end game. So, I found very quickly that DC was saturated with, people with a lot or great credentials, a lot of lawyers, but, it's really tough to kind of get into it and make your way. And even if you did, working on the Hill, you can work at a low-level staff job and really barely make ends meet living in such an expensive town. So, the experience that summer was wonderful. I got to, work and get to know the Capitol very, very well. I got to give tours of the Capitol. So I learned a lot about the history and, my way around the Capitol. Me and my fellow interns would try to find any happy hour specials because we were unpaid interns and, drinks are expensive up there. So got to get the local bar scene pretty good up in DC. But the main thing I learned was just how difficult it is, I guess would be the word, to get things done in DC. I mean, you start to kind of see how the sausage gets made up there. There's just these monumental lifts of work and communication and timing just to make small things happen. And it really gave me an appreciation for how hard it is to get the big stuff done in DC. But then, so after I was up in DC, I went to grad school and then got an internship at the John Locke Foundation. And so I got to experience state public policy and state politics. And so, at the John Locke Foundation, I was a research intern. So I worked for the entire research team, working on a bunch of different issue areas and getting to go to the General Assembly every now and then and working with our government affairs team. And, it was such a juxtaposition from DC to the state. I mean, at the state, my organization was actively working and, seeing legislation getting passed. And there was so much, it just seemed like such a different dynamic of business and politics here at the state level. It's a lot more personable. It's a lot easier to get things done. I mean, there's still, complex problems, but you're not moving mountains in the Capitol and working with different offices like that. So it's a lot faster down at the state level, and that's, I think, kind of what piqued my interest. I always kind of anticipated that I would end up in DC, but once I got a look at federal politics, no matter how much I love DC, I knew state politics was the place to be, because you can actually get things done, and it seemed a lot more fulfilling than working in DC and working so hard to maybe get just one small thing done.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I really appreciate is I personally, I have a lot of gratitude towards the administrative staff for anyone working for the senators, because they kind of, it's like kind of a thankless job, I guess. They work so many hours and, they have to take so many calls from, from the local constituents. So I don't know how those guys do it, but I think it's pretty hard.
Yeah. It's I mean, you deal with so much constituent services up in DC, and there's so many. I mean, we're fortunate that we have access to our elected officials like this, but I think there's a lot of misconception about what powers elected officials have, but there is a lot that they can do, and so constituent services was such a big part of what we did in DC.
And so you applied for the John Locke Foundation Policy Research Intern, and then you are also a graduate teaching assistant or someplace, right? Is that right?
Yeah. So I was, I did the internship at Locke in between my second and third semester of grad school, and at the time I got to know one of my professors really well, Dr. Kevin Mullenix, and so I ended up being his graduate teaching assistant. So that was a really cool experience to help him, and it afforded me a lot more opportunity to talk with him about sort of the political science world and the work that I was doing. So I was very fortunate for that. I still admire Dr. Mullenix quite a bit, and he was a great mentor in grad school at the time.
Nice. So after that, you graduated, and then you applied for the position in John Locke. Is that right? So what was your position when you applied, and now you're the director? Can you walk us through, your journey here?
Sure. Yeah. So in grad school, I remember there was a public policy class that I took, and we used this book about the passage of the Affordable Care Act as sort of one of our reading materials that semester. And the point of the book was to talk about the political process, like how did the Affordable Care Act get through? But I really found myself more interested in the healthcare policy aspect of it. I really couldn't believe that, that this was a program that the federal government put in place at the time. And, I didn't really follow a lot of national politics at the time. So I was still learning so much. And so I really took an interest in healthcare policy. And I figured at the time, there probably wasn't too many right-leaning healthcare policy hopefuls coming out of grad school, and I knew that it'd probably be difficult to find a position with that title. So at the time, it was the summer of 2018. My predecessor at the time at the John Locke Foundation left to go work for the General Assembly. And so they had a position open up in the healthcare policy at the healthcare policy analyst position. They called me, asked me if I wanted to apply for it. And at the time I was applying for so many other jobs and not having any luck. So I got extremely lucky at the timing of that. I went up to Raleigh, interviewed, and I got the position. So August of 2018, my now fiance and I at the time moved up to Raleigh, and I worked as a healthcare policy analyst for 2.5 years, working in all things state and by default federal healthcare policy. So that was a great experience. I learned so much about the healthcare system down at the state level. And then the pandemic came. We were all working from home, and I really kind of got burnt out being the healthcare guy during the pandemic. There was a lot of inquiries coming to me about masks and vaccines and everything. And, I just said, I love this work, but I kind of want to do something else. And, I really, I got to work with my former boss, Becky Gray, a lot when I was a healthcare policy analyst. And, I thought to myself, I love research, I love writing, but I really want to be in the action more. I want to be talking to the decision makers. And so I really want to get into lobbying with the public policy work that I have now. So I approached my CEO. I told her that I was really interested in government affairs. And she told me that Becky, my former boss, would need some help. And so late 2020, I switched over to the government affairs team at the John Locke Foundation. And I worked under Becky Gray, who was an incredible mentor. I owe a lot of my whatever success I've had now to her, and I just am really appreciative of her taking me under her wing, and teaching me so much and introducing me to people and things like that. And so after about 1.5 years working with Becky, she accepted a new role at another organization. And I was promoted up to take over for her as director of government affairs. So it was a pretty quick transition. And, I was up for the challenge. Becky had done that, been in this role for over a decade. And so I knew I had big shoes to fill, but with the groundwork that she laid and everything that she taught me, I knew that I was ready for it. But so that's how I got here. I started this role in January of 2022. So I just got through my first short session this year. We're very excited that it's over. Learned a lot of good lessons and experiences for me as a younger lobbyist in this world. So that's how I got to where I'm at today. And a lot of sheer dumb luck there.
Excellent. So can you tell us a little bit about what kind of policies are you currently working on or you worked on in the recent past?
Yeah, absolutely. So the John Locke Foundation, my organization, is a state-based public policy think tank. So we work in a number of different issue areas: healthcare, education, budget and taxes, regulatory. Those are our big buckets. And as we merged with another center-right group last year, the Civitas Institute, and so we merged with another organization that handled issue areas that the Locke Foundation traditionally had not handled. So now under our policy portfolio, we have election issues that we work with, and also some agriculture and energy issues. So we deal in a number of issues, and it occupies our time.
And if you had to explain it to a layman like me, can you tell us, do you have clients and they come to you and say, these are the issues, let's say, for example, agriculture. Can you tell us what kind of problems do they face and what kind of policies do you have to work for?
Yeah. So, I mean, we, our organization, we have, a set of principles that we have that informs our public policy stances. We're a nonpartisan organization, so we're not Republican or Democrat. We have principles of limited government, free markets, individual liberty, personal responsibility, and seeking the best balance between the public and private sector. And so that's how our organization was founded, on those principles. And we sort of view those principles as a lens that we look through when we look at public policy issues. And it's really a matter of, is this increasing someone's freedom or liberty, or is it taking it away? And so that's the way we look at public policy issues. Now we are, I should say that we have a long-standing public policy stances on certain issues that have been our stance for decades, over 30 years now. And so a lot of what we work on and our public policy stances have been in place for a while, but every now and then, or a lot of times, people will come to us with issues to say, hey, this is what's going on, would you guys look into it? And that could be members of the public, other lobbyists, other think tanks, other organizations in North Carolina that they think we may have an interest in it. So, we'll sort of internally review it. We'll kick around ideas. We'll say, does this align with the mission of our organization? And, if it does, we'll work on it if we think it rises to that level. So we're a completely privately funded organization from private individual donors. And so we get feedback from them about what they're hearing, what they think is important. But it tends to stay pretty consistent and similar. I think over the years, I think one of the best things I like about Locke the most is nobody's surprised when we take a stance on an issue. We've always been consistent on our public policy stances. So, there's never any real surprises, I think. And so we tend to take every 2 years, we have a public policy agenda, which is pretty standard, but then throughout the session, issues come up that we think are important enough for us to work on. So that's sort of how our issue portfolio and our priorities come together.
And can you tell us, switching over to your responsibilities, can you just walk us through what is on a day-to-day basis? What do you do when you're in session and when you're out of session?
Yeah. So day to day, I'd say while we're in session, my day to day is I'm the external affairs liaison for the organization. So anybody down at the General Assembly or other outside groups, I'm the point person for our organization to sort of have these discussions, and that's from my end, communicating our policy stances on things and trying to sell our policy priorities. And then, like I said, a lot of times other groups come to us with issues. So I'll talk to them. I'll say, yes, this is, an issue that rises to the level of us working on it or not. And so I'm kind of the external affairs manager. But a large portion of that in session is I'm down at the General Assembly every day, and I'm working on our priorities. I'm communicating back to the office about what's going on. I'm sending people bills, or our research division, different bills to take a look at and to maybe write on or, come up with policy stances. But, inside the General Assembly, my days typically are meetings with individual legislators, meetings with other lobbyists, going to committee meetings. And, that's kind of the misconception that there's all this, glamour down there, but it's really, you're going to committee meetings, you're listening to legislators argue about different bills, you're talking with them afterwards to tell them your position on things. And that's kind of the thing I like about it the most, I think, is that, no 2 days are the same. Every day is different. Things pop up, and, any lobbyist will tell you, nothing is set in stone down there at the General Assembly. Meetings change, committees change, votes change. It's just constantly keeping up with the fast-paced world. So it looks different every day, but the main thing that I do, I would boil it down to, is I sort of manage and shepherd through our public policy agenda, and that involves a host of different things, and depends on the day what those things are.
And can you tell us, what is the toughest part of your job?
The toughest part of my job is, you're not going to agree on everything with everybody. But I think the thing, or you can always find some things that you agree with. So I think the toughest part is when you have someone that you agree with, maybe 75, 80, 90% on, but then there's that one big issue that you disagree on, and you got to go to your friends or fight against your friends. And I think for me so far, I think that's been the toughest thing, is when you just have different public policy stances on an issue, but you have the utmost respect for these people, and you wish they wouldn't take that stance. But at the end of the day, you're still good friends with them, and you're still gonna like them afterwards, even though they may have voted the wrong way on a bill you liked, or they're taking a different stance than you would like. So sometimes there's just that bit of inherent conflict that happens, and that's tough sometimes.
I understand. And looking back at your career, can you think of any notable incidents or funny incidents which you can think of, which you would like to state?
Man, I'm sure there are. I'm trying to think back to last session. I remember, we worked so long last year on trying to get a budget done, and we didn't know if the governor was going to sign it or not. And I was out with my boss Becky, and we were at this little place that we would go to, sort of a hole in the wall place, and we had worked so hard. We're kind of sitting there feeling exhausted and kind of defeated that we thought the budget wasn't going to get signed, and we were sitting there, and all of a sudden we got these news alerts that the governor was going to sign a budget. And I just remember sitting in there. It was a really cool moment for me, kind of getting through my first session and celebrating it with my boss, and it was just a cool moment. So not really a funny moment, but that was definitely a cool moment for me. I mean, yeah, I'm sure that there's plenty of funny moments. I mean, you hear some kooky things on the floor and in committee, and things out of context sound really, really funny. But I think that just comes with, there's so many personalities down at the General Assembly that when you get them all together, there's always going to be some fun moments. But I can't think of any more that come to mind right now.
No worries, no worries. And can you suggest someone who wants to get started in the field of lobbying? Mm-hmm. What do you think their first step should be?
First step, I think, well, I mean, in this world, I think networking is the absolute essential key. You have to know people. And so I think, people in this world, they are willing to talk to people. So, I think doing informational interviews, just introducing yourself to people, I think that is the number one key to being a successful lobbyist, because you have to know the players, you have to know people's personalities, and that doesn't happen overnight. So you need to get to know as many people that work in the space, and figure out exactly how they operate and what their work is, and just get to know them as people. And I think that's really, really where you need to start. So whether that's DC or North Carolina or another state, building up your network is priority one.
And do you suggest that they start by going down to the assembly in person, or where do they need to go to get started in networking?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be a bunch of different places, but maybe I got lucky that I got my start in a think tank, so naturally this is a pre-established entity that has the name carries some significance and people recognize the name. But yeah, I mean, I think you can start in grassroots groups, small local groups that are politically active. You can get involved in party politics if that's sort of your you want to take that foray into this world. But there's tons of civic groups that you can get involved with. You can volunteer to work in elections. I mean, just anything I think that kind of gets you to sort of get into some of these institutions, whether that's inside the General Assembly or outside. Any opportunity you can get to meet people that are politically engaged, I think is always going to give you a leg up down the line.
Excellent advice. With that, we move into the last segment where you get the opportunity to speak anything about either yourself, your organization, or your aspirations in the future. Anything goes.
Um, wow. Yeah. So, I mean, I'll start with my organization. I think, the biggest misconception I think about our organization is that we're, a partisan organization and sort of just an extension of the Republican Party. And, I think that's a big misconception because, we have disagreements with Republicans as much as, we have disagreements with Democrats. And, like I said before, we look at public policy issues through that lens that I talked about. We have these core tenets that we believe in. And, that ideology, I think, is really how you would describe it as a classical liberal, small L liberal, that, is focused on equality, economic freedom, individual liberty. And so, we may side with Republicans more because their policies are more closely aligned with our ideology. But we're not just a partisan tool. We do in-depth research based on our principles, and that's where all of our work and our public policy recommendations come from. So I think that's one misconception. And I think towards the future, I hope that what our role can be, again, is informing new legislators, veteran legislators, as much as possible, giving them the best public policy research, data, public policy recommendations as possible, because our goal is prosperity for all North Carolinians, economic success, individual success, and we believe truly that our public policy recommendations implemented would give North Carolinians that best opportunity. And so that's, I think we get sometimes some really unfair criticism about sort of our motivations and how we operate. But at the end of the day, we're motivated and driven by the public policy research, and again, viewing the public policy process through the lens of our core principled tenets. So I'll say that as far as for the future, for me, I love North Carolina. I love North Carolina politics. So I imagine, unless something crazy happens, I'd stay in this world for a long time. And, my goal is just to be, again, a steward for the people that I represent. I like I said, I have immense respect and admiration for our system of self-government, and I want that to persist. So I think, success for me would be to spread that, to spread the institutional knowledge for the next generation to be set up to continue or to help our government continue on its own, and to help pass some really good legislation that benefits all North Carolinians and gives people the opportunity to be as successful as they can on their own and chart their own path. So I love what I do now. I love the organization. I love what it stands for. And, I hope to continue that work and continue in the footsteps of my predecessor, Becky Gray, and, just continue to, work on behalf of the people of North Carolina.
Jordan, I just want to state that with the amount of preparation you have done for this interview and the dedication you have, I'm pretty sure you'll go achieve a lot of big heights. Thanks so much.
You.
Thanks, Jordan, for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you.